The floor in here is lava, and he can't eat in here because it's like a foot from where I should leave the room is really what he wants. Just leave the room, shut it down, leave the room, go somewhere else. But barring that, there's food on the floor that he can't eat. So
Yeah.
just so everyone knows what those sad cries will be.
Well, to be fair, he's a cat, so it is his room.
Oh yeah, oh it's his house. Everything's his. It's his house and I'm his bitch. So I'm not complaining.
That's like me with my kid and wife. I'm their bitch.
It's easier. Just get it's like whatever. You can't you lose any right to your own life anyway when you adopt a cat. It's like this is just how it's going to be now. So there's no point. Why struggle? It's a waste of time and energy and effort.
Welcome to Dead Headspace, part of Silver Shamrock's Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Unburying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for a new generation. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Ghana, YouTube, and all other major platforms. I'm your host, Patrick R. McDonough, joined always by my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're joined by the author of the Cipher Under the Poppy trilogy and her latest collection, Velocities. Say hi, Kathe Koja.
Hi everybody.
And we would love to know what got you into horror.
That's a really sideways and interesting question. I don't know that I ever thought of any genre as a genre. I've written a lot of different books in a lot of different modes and genres, and I have 7 YA novels that some of the people who are familiar with my horror work don't know. Some of the folks who read my Under the Poppy historical trilogy were very surprised to hear that I had done anything else. So to me, genre is like a really cool party in a big house. Like there's a big house with a lot of rooms, or you're in a club and there's a lot of different theme rooms in the club, and you just kind of go from room to room and have fun with the people that you meet there. And what I have found across the board, and what I was lucky enough to come into the horror and dark fiction community early on, people were remarkably welcoming to an author they had never heard of because you were in that room and you were at that party. And so people were very cool to a new person. And I don't know that I understood at the time how special that is to be welcomed in as like it's a brand new byline. People don't. I had published short fiction before, but I don't know that how well the horror community knew about that work or cared about it. But it was really nice to come in and find all these people with whom I had, a lot of Venn diagram, a lot in common, and they were ready to hear what I had to say. So how cool is that?
Yeah, and I don't know what book it was for, but I saw a quote of Clive Barker having high regards for you with a blurb. Do you recall which book that may be?
I don't, but I have high regard for him, so that is pretty cool also. He was one of the people, the books of blood, I always go back to those as, and some of the stories like in the hills, the cities, and some of the stories that I came upon early were exciting to read because there were no defined boundaries, and it wasn't the kind of work where you felt like, oh, I might have to, pull back on the stick, or I might have to think about what to. You can't work effectively. It's like trying to do something with one hand tied behind your back. If you're really worried about what people might think, or if you're going to. The only time I ever felt I did not feel constrained, but I felt a different kind of responsibility was writing the YA novels. And I find writing for young people to be a lot more demanding in some ways than for adults, because young people don't really want your shit and they will tell you. that they don't really have time for your shit. And if you're boring them, they'll tell you that. And they'll tell you when you make a misstep too. I like to tell this story. I was at a school visit for one of my YA novels, Stray Dog, and it's about a stray dog, not surprisingly. And some of it is told in the dog's point of view of the dog is stealing food from dumpsters and eats the sandwich. And a young girl stood up and said, you talk about the dog is eating a sandwich and seeing the sandwich, and the dog sees that it's yellow, but dogs only see in black and white. I know, that's what I said.
That was good timing.
Right? He was 100% right. And that had eluded me. It had eluded the first readers, eluded the editor, eluded all of us. But she was 100% right. And so I said, you're 100% right. And I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, there shouldn't be no yellow mustard in that section. And so writing for young people, it's not like you're losing anything in acuity or in communication. But I really felt an extra responsibility to tell all the truth, because there is nothing worse to me. There is no greater sin than in lying to the young. You don't lie to kids ever about anything. You might want to know what level of the truth they're asking for. Like sometimes your 2-year-old will ask you something and it seems like an existential question, but they're operating, they want a different level of, it's like, here's my question. I don't need your answer. I need the answer to my question. And it's true. He's like, you talk a lot of shit and there's food right here, right here. Look, right here.
What did you say your cat's name is?
His name is Dash.
Oh, okay. Any particular reason?
No, I don't know. Whenever we have adopted a cat, it always takes a minute to get to know them a little bit and find out what their name might be. And his shelter name was Blake, which is not a bad name, but it's not his name. So we had to change it. But yeah, you're always entering into a conversation with any reader, right? No matter what you're writing, no matter what a story is a conversation. And when I do write for younger people, I'm always aware of that extra burden or extra responsibility. It's not a burden, but it is a responsibility. And a couple of times more than a couple, I ran into some flack or blowback from educational entities because of that. And in one of the books I had, one of the characters was in a moment of high stress and said, fuck. And this was an issue for some places. There were places that I had been invited to talk to the students, and then I was disinvited, but then I was invited, but then I could only not talk to them in the classroom because I might have, some fuck word or something. But I could talk to them at an assembly, right? And the kids thought this was hilarious, right? The whole controversy was very funny to them. And one of the kids at the Q&A said, Miss Koja, why can't you talk to us in our classroom? You know why? Well, you tell me why. Why? Because you said a word. I said, is it a word that you hear in school ever? And they all laughed. I mean, they're like, yeah, we're in middle school. People are aware more than anyone, right? Because they're mostly just trying it out, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, you're a fuckity fuck bag. Because it's like, it's a new thing, right? And you can really get some people upset if you're going to say these words. And so then we started talking about that instead and said, okay, well, why would that be a wrong word to say in school? If you're telling me you say it in school all the time, maybe not you, but if you all tell me you're saying it, why is that a wrong word? Why can't we say it? And so instead we talked about that, and that was kind of cool. And to kind of take that repressive energy and say, okay, this is something that they're trying to fence you off from hearing. And schools, educators are in a hard spot sometimes between administrators and the parents, and they get squeezed. So I would never blame a classroom teacher, and I would never put that on a classroom teacher. But sometimes administrators are so worried about parental reaction that they will overreact. And now I have never had that happen to me in the horror community. Not one person has ever said, that's too much, you've gone too far. So
There's very few things. Blatant racism, blatant hate speeches. That should really be the only.
oh yeah, well that's you know what I'm saying. There's no visible taboo, let's say. But I wonder sometimes too if this genre, like any genres, if there are taboos sometimes that we don't know are there, or that we would be surprised, right? If somebody, like, are there lines that we have never seen? And if someone crossed one, would we know?
Brennan, I know that you were going to jump in, but I want to pick your brain as well as Kathy's. This goes along the lines of something that Chuck Palahniuk said to us last week, which was basically the horror that the society won't talk about is the next big thing. We were talking about Ira 11 and Rosemary's Baby in the beginning of the episode, and basically he was saying how the thing that society and people probably may not, most of us might not even know about right now to discuss is what that next big thing will be in this genre. Brennan, what are your thoughts on that? And let's jump to Kathe.
I mean, yeah, I like that parallel, but I also think that just Kathe, with your work in mind, I mean, that kind of seems like something not just that you've thought about, but something that you'd be looking for, actively looking for. What is that boundary that we might eventually cross without even realizing it? I wonder if you have any theories on that, like even what ballpark it would fall into, whether it would have to do with race, with class, with uh identity. I don't know.
Class is a big one too. I don't know if class is it, but class is something that we almost never talk about in the States. It's there, and we all know that it's there, but we all are supposed to have bought into this idea that everybody is, even though you see blatantly around you reflected in so many ways, equality is what we strive for, but we have it almost nowhere, except inside our skins. That's where we begin, but that's where it stops. If I had to draw a personal line for things I would find very difficult to write about, and in fact, I had recently had to set aside a book that I was working on, a short novel, is cruelty, human cruelty, really. And I don't mean like saw cruelty or like, stabbing stuff. Do you know in Pan's Labyrinth, there's the moment where the colonel guy is interrogating the guy who stutters?
Oh God, that nose scene. You're gonna bring that up, aren't you?
You know,
Oh my God.
that is so disturbing because you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it isn't even what's going to happen. It's that this guy is taking so much pleasure in just the cruelty to get there. And that is a difficult line for me to cross, because I don't, not even in the sense of saying, oh, I don't want to glamorize this, or I don't want to make this cool, in the sense of having to feel that to be able to convey it, what it's like, especially cruelty to the helpless, or to the small, or to the defenseless. That's a line that I would find hard to cross or to deal with. And I will say that the only fictional regret I have, or the only regret I have for any of my work, is in the cipher when the mouse goes down the hole. And if I could do it again, I would not do that. I would not do that. And as life has gone on and I've become more aware, and I see that over and over again. We all see it in films when an animal is used as a signifier, like, he killed that puppy. You know he's bad. That, for one thing, that's lazy. That's a lazy thing to do. And for another thing, the death of an innocent creature should not ever be anything but that. It shouldn't be a signifier. And so, if I could, I would go back in and take that mouse out of there. I have no problem with the hand.
That is interesting. Wow.
But yeah, it upsets me.
I got one comment, and then Brennan, take it away, please. When you brought up Pan's Labyrinth and you said interrogation, I had these like waves of chills go up my spine and into my head. Yeah, I remember that scene all too well. It's oh.
And not to get off into film, but another line that is crossed a lot. Oh Christ, I can't remember his name. The director of Funny Games. Shoot, that's what it'll come to me. A movie that is about, and a lot of his work is about cruelty. Michael Haneke, and his work is about straight up cruelty to each other, and that makes it difficult to watch. There's another film called a Serbian film that is notorious for, and that I have not seen, and then
I refuse to watch that as a new dad too. Like, fuck that, I'm not doing that.
When the film was new, a friend of mine, a director, was at South by Southwest where they were showing it, and people just erupted afterwards. And they had not had a full understanding of what they were going to see. And
oh no,
Jesus. And he said, the whole point of doing this was to illustrate, I'm making a political point about cruelty in my country, about political cruelty, and that's what this is about, and I don't regret doing it. I will never regret doing it. So, but yeah, things like, and you can't, an image like that, you can't unsee. You can't, when something has hit you that hard, it will always be part of you. It always is going to leave a mark. And you have to be real careful how you do that to people too. You have to have a real good reason. I'm not saying he was wrong. He did what he did. He made this thing. He made a piece of art. Okay. Pan's Labyrinth, was Del Toro wrong? No, I think the film is a masterpiece. But when I think of it, that is almost the first scene I think of, is that awful. And that to me is a much harder to say. Should a kid watch this movie? I would really hesitate, not because of the fawn, or not even because of, eyeball guy, but because of that moment. Not because they should never know that the world is cruel, because they'll find out. But is that the way you want them to find out? Is there another way that might not leave such a mark?
I would ease them in. Yeah, that's like throwing a kid in the deep end. That's a good point. Brennan,
that's what I was thinking. Is you brought it up because it's that demonstration of cruelty, and I remember watching that for the first time and being, of course, shocked by that, and it was because of how unflinching it was. Up to that point, the movie kind of convinced you that it was the type of movie that would pan away at the last minute, and then when it doesn't, it's just kind of the next step in that cruelty. But I never really felt like it was gratuitous in that, it was just happening for shock value, or it was just happening to earn that R rating or whatever. And I think that really, I guess I never really thought of it as a demonstration of, the next step of cruelty, but that's, yeah, I mean, it sounds weird to say I like that line of thought, but I'm looking at it at a different angle now. That's interesting.
And the things in the movie that are scary or, legit disturbing, you never really know if the fawn is good or bad, or you're never even really sure. You could think of the ending in many different ways, but you never feel that same sense of threat from the monsters, even the eye guy, as you do, even when the eye guy eats the fairies.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen that, sorry. You're like, oh, that's awful. But you know that he's, not only is he a monster, but he knows he's a monster, and everybody knows he's a monster, right? They're all the fantastic creatures are inhabiting, they are what they are, and you know what they are, and they know what they are. But the Colonel Stepfather guy, he's supposed to be like one of the good guys, right? He's supposed to be, and that makes it 1,000 times worse. And he has all the power. He has, what is worse than, cruelty with power? Usually you see it in the more powerless, right? The people who hurt someone else because they feel like that's how they need to exercise, whatever authority they think they have, or they need to demonstrate authority. But when you're holding all the cards and yet you're still, that, I would be hard pressed to think of anything too much worse in human behavior, because that's the wellspring, right? It's that I have power over you, and I can do whatever I want. I want.
Absolutely. Brendan, I don't want us to move on until we tackle your reply on what Kathe was talking about how educators, their bosses, parents, how you broach subjects such as what she's talking about. A simple word like fuck. Like, let's be real.
Well, thankfully,
kids all hear that.
First off, Kathe, I'm a classroom teacher, so that's why Patrick's throwing that at me.
Oh,
But so thank you for your kind words. But
is it not? I mean, is that not?
Now, generally, I work with, like, I'm at a K-2 school right now, so we don't really have many outbreaks of the word fuck. But so if I have to deal with that, I'm gonna message you and let you know how that goes. But my first thought was, as soon as you opened up that dialogue of let's talk about why we can't be in the classroom, let's talk about how we hear that word at school, but now it's all of a sudden a big deal. I mean, middle schoolers are notorious for just being too cool and maybe shutting out, not wanting to engage in conversation, but I'll bet that opened them right up. And that's I'd be so go ahead.
Because it's so hard to be, that to me is such a difficult age, in that we forget you don't even know what you're going to look like from one end of a year to the next. I mean, I have looked like this for a long time. That worry is gone for me, but you know what I mean? You don't even know what is happening to you. You don't know what you're going to look like. You're constantly, and now it's 1,000 times worse, because now everything you do can be preserved for all time. But it's so difficult just to get from one end of the day to the other, that you have to kind of armor up, because who knows, man? Your friends could turn on you. Something could happen. What if, who knows what? And you're ruined forever, because when you're 12, you don't have a ton of life to. I mean, even if you look at a middle school text, Romeo and Juliet gets used a lot. And if you think about it, that's a terrible thing to have. And look what they do, right? Look what it's the dumbest thing ever. They're poor kids.
Wait, what happens? I'm just joking.
And this is okay for them, right? It's like they end up dead and their families are like, oh, this is horrible, but now we're going to reconcile. That's terrible. That should not be taught. I mean, eradicate Shakespeare from schools, I think, is the takeaway there. No more Shakespeare. More fucks and less Shakespeare.
That's a quote of the day. More fucks and less Shakespeare.
You should run for a school board on that platform.
Now, I want to touch on one more thing on the first subject we've kind of dove into, which is YA. I've seen a lot of people have different definitions of it. Of course, you can Google it. But as a YA author, I'd like to know, in your words, your opinion, what YA is, what constitutes a story to be YA.
I think and I can only, talk about my own work.
Yeah, of course.
It's all I'm qualified to speak about. But a lot of what all my YA novels shared was a sense of becoming, or not just growth. And then we had growth. I mean, you have growth you keep growing until you die. You have to, you're growing until you stop. But the conscious sense of things are changing for me, and I have to make decisions about how am I going to behave, how am I going to think, what am I going to believe in, what do I know is true, and how am I going to understand myself in the light of that. And a part of me knows that I don't have all the information I need. And the same way when you think about books that you read when you were little, and those books, that there is a book right here. I'm afraid to move the stack, so horrible things happen. We'll cut that out later if this whole fucking book comes down.
Oh, she said fuck.
We'll pretend it didn't, right? We'll just pretend that didn't happen. But the original copy of Harriet the Spy.
Oh, man. I've never seen that cover.
This book meant the world to me when I was a young person and a young writer, because Harriet, for people who might not know the book, Harriet is a spy, and she spies on her classmates and on the world, and she writes in her notebook the truth of everything she knows and has seen. And then one day people see her notebook, and the story is about how do you tell the truth to yourself, and yet how can you still live in the world if you're going to tell the truth to yourself, and if you're going to be a writer and write it down for other people ostensibly, to read one day. The way this book affected me when I was young, and the way that ideas affect you when you're young, especially the first time you meet an idea. And we have all seen kids when they're putting something together for the first time, and just that look, right? Like, I remember giving a talk at a school, an alternative school. Those are my favorite schools. And a lot of times they're in like the worst building, or the building that still has like an old boiler, and they're like, whatever. I love those schools. And I was talking to the students and said, and these were older kids, these were high school kids, but it's like, when you say to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I said, be really careful, because you have just had an idea that is original to you, and you have just put things together for yourself. Listen to yourself whenever you say that, because you have just made a breakthrough of some kind. And that's what YA is. It's, hey, wait a minute. Hey, wait a minute. And you're experiencing yourself as an autonomous person in the world with your own ideas and your own thoughts, not what your parents think or your friends or anyone, but it's your own thought. And that's what I try to get at in the YAs that I've done.
That's perfect. And I really ask that because you never know who's listening. There could be a YA author out there, or someone that's like, hey, I write YA. So that's why I like to ask those types of questions. Plus, we learned a thing or two there. I laughed when you talked about the bad boiler of the alternative schools, because my dad teaches in he used to teach in one of the roughest cities in Massachusetts, Brockton, Mass. It's not the nicest place, and now he teaches in a nicer town, but it's always alternative schools. And I don't know how he does it. He brought me in when I was still living up in Mass, and sit in a class for a day, and I was in my young 20s, and they were high schoolers, and this girl said, he's old, and that was the first time in my life, in my head, I'm like, I feel like breaking down. Really? I'm not old. I'm 23, But I bring this all up because kind of neat thing is someone that worked with my dad was Mark Goddard. He's the actor. He was in I think like one episode of The Rifleman. He was in Lost in Space. He was a kid during the TV show. But weird stuff, because I started looking up Mark Goddard, and he had several ex-wives, and one of them, they found a dead body, and it's just, there's some weird paths that you go down. Like, this is a guy that worked with my dad next to my hometown that was in a super famous show in the 60s that you go down different branches of his, like, great grandfather invented some fuel for space shuttles. And
Whoa.
I'm branching out from you talking about YA, but this is just like the path of the internet is a strange one.
It's an unknowable path too. I know, or when you start researching one thing and then you look up after like 20 minutes and you're somehow on how did they make the formula for Mike and Ike's, which is it's like, why am I looking at this? And yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I know one thing I'm finding in the book that I'm writing right now called Dark Factory, I will do some research on, okay, I want to call, the last one was a vodka brand. I want them to be at a party, a launch for a new vodka, and here's the name that I made up, but let me make sure that it's not an actual name. It is real hard to make up a stupid name for vodka because they're all taken. They're all taken. I'm like, oh shit, oh no, I can't use that either. No, that's a real one too. Okay, never mind. Finally, I had to pull something out of my ass and just move on, but it's like, I'm glad that exists. And yet, yeah, and if I had gone on from there, a lot of this book takes place in a club and a dance club, and there's so much lore, DJ lore and DJ stories and stories about weird clubs and stories about dance/sex clubs, and for days, I could just sit there for days and do nothing but research and go, wow, didn't see that coming. But yeah, where were we?
I don't know. See, I was talking about the boiler, and I laughed, and I didn't know if that was appropriate or not, so I felt like explaining it so I don't seem like a potential dick.
No, it's so appropriate. Like that school, the alternative school, it's always in the building. Like if a school district approaches the town or the city and says, "Look, we can't, have this elementary school in this building anymore. It's not up to code. It's out of date." And then the town builds a new building, everybody shifts over, and the alternative school is in the building that was, one step away from being condemned. So
absolutely, and it's been true across the board in wealthy districts, anywhere that I have gone. And those are always the schools where I have never seen a discipline problem. I have never seen anything but a respectful audience. In fact, I went to one school, and it was for my book, The Blue Mirror, excuse me. And the teacher said, well, we've read, the kids have read the book, and we have a list of questions for you. And there must have been 36 questions on this list, and some of them were stunning. And this one young woman had said, there's a cat in the book, and she said, was the cat named this because it's reminiscent of this Egyptian deity, and is it da, 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 da? And I said, no, but I'm going to tell people from now on that it was, because this is better than what I thought of. But even when the students were not 100% on board with having to sit and listen to someone talk, I have never had anything but respectful silence. It's like, it's a completely different vibe. And I have talked in many different schools, and in, independent schools, private schools, very expensive schools everywhere. And yeah, I would go there first. And sometimes I've had to ask too and said, does your district, especially if you're doing like a district-wide event, does your district have oh yeah, would you want to yeah, I would like to step in there. Yeah, I would. It's like, that's where I would be at if I was a student. So yeah, that's the school where I belong. And I used to I would do a thing. It was to get their attention. I've done this in other classrooms, but to take the book that I had come there to talk about and say, this book without a reader, and then I would throw it across the room, and they would go, oh, how could you do But it's like without, if someone is not reading that book, it's pointless. It is just a thing. It's, reading is what, and sometimes to the kids who might struggle, or reading might be more difficult for them, or they didn't, reading. I would say it doesn't matter if you ever read this book or any book, but you must know how to read, because everyone who wants to control you can read. Every single person who's going to tell you what to do can all read, and you must be able to meet them where they are, because it would be great if you read all my books and they meant something to you, but that is immaterial. You must know how to read, and hopefully that made some sense, because it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
That's right there. It's another form of cruelty. I don't know too many people that are illiterate, but I don't know how they go through life. Like, you can't even read a menu. Can't even. What if you have to sign a contract? You have to
Right.
trust that person 100%.
And one of my uncles was functionally illiterate, and we in the extended family never knew it until much, much later in his life. And he got by on memorization and memorized street. I mean, he can't read street sign, right? I mean, think of,
Oh
so
my
you
God. Yeah.
figure out, okay, I get off at this exit, or I turn here, or it's this whole panoply of, it's exhausting. And finally, he was deeply ashamed of it, and and when it finally came out and he was able to overcome that, what a relief, right? Right now I'm using Duolingo to learn German, and I'm really bad at it. And it's very great to be, especially as someone who has been using words, for my entire life, and hopefully using them fairly well, to not be able to even understand sentence structure and really have to struggle. It's great. It just gives you such an appreciation for just the way language works, and I mean, I'm at baby level. Like, the dog runs fast. I mean, I'm not good at this, okay? I am really struggling. But we are all there at some point with some language, right? And it's a gift. I mean, the whole point of any of these books is the gift of that conversation, with using language as a way to make a connection, or to open something up, or to, I go back to conversation a lot, because without a reader, a book is inert. And one of the other things that I do is create performances, immersive performances, where everything is about the audience, because they're not an audience, they're a collaborator at this point. And I've done shows, and some are great, some people were put off, or they were scared, or whatever. I did a production of Dracula in the basement of an old mercantile building in Detroit, where I live. And the people came in through, it was like, it had like the big old windows, the big shop windows, and there was a little glass vestibule. And when people came in, I would hold them in there. And we calculated this to make sure that, and if anybody was really claustrophobic or anything, I would say, if you have a problem with this, of course, step out, it's not an issue. But I held them in there, and people would get more and more kind of antsy, because they were in this constructed space. And then I would take them out one by one and just randomly pick people. And the whole point of doing this was, the tagline of this show was, appetite must be fed. And the poster, I know one handy, it was great. It was of a fork. And the idea was, you are not the top of the food chain anymore. Now you're in this world, and now you're food. So act like it's food. And the way some people responded intuitively to that. Some people would not respond. And, there was always someone at one of the shows who was standing against the wall with their arms folded, because they're not playing along with your shit. And fair enough. I mean, you bought your ticket, you can do whatever you want. But without their participation, it can't happen. The energy was of all these people in this semi-dark room and because it's immersive, everything in the room is supposed to be there and everything has a purpose. And the table is set with nothing, but on the shelves I hired a chef, a vegan chef, to make, everything was vegan, but we had like this vegan blood sausage, and we had these, and all this food was perfectly edible and perfectly safe. And it was, if anybody ever ate any of it, they would have been fine. No one would touch that food. People would look at that food. Okay. And their reactions, what attracted me to making this kind of work to begin with, is it's exactly like being with a reader when they read your book, but you get to see them and you get to have that immediate feedback. And they would always surprise me. Always something would happen where you would be like, something's good, something's not good. But that they brought their own energy and their own. I did a version of Alice in Wonderland where it was in a school, in a little person school, a parochial school, and they, like, with the little chairs and such, and you could go from room to room and see different things happening, and the White Rabbit is trying to help you, go along and see stuff. And one of the characters, instead of having Tweedledee and Tweedledum, we only had one. We had one Tweedle, and in our version of it, she was her twin, or her other half, was dead, and so she was all alone in her little room, and the performer and I, we decided she could not leave that room. She could only be in her little playroom. And so she decorated it with little lights, and she had toys, and she would paint people's nails, and she had Laffy Taffy to share, and people would come in and play with her, and everyone had a great time. And at one point in the show, the Red Queen, who had been going through the production randomly slaying people, came for the Tweedle and pulled her out of her little room and killed her, choked her out. And when we were developing this, the two performers, we were trying to figure out, okay, she's going to have to be dead for the rest of the show, so we have to put her somewhere. She wanted to be dead on the floor. Said, you can't be dead on the floor because people will step on you, it's dark, that's not safe. So we decided, there was this big funky couch that they said we could use, and we said, all right, she'll be kill her and throw her on the couch. Okay, so she did. They choked out the Tweedle and threw her on the couch. And in real life, I will point out, these two are like super best friends. So there was that whole thing in it too. It was just cognitive dissonance. But she chokes her out and throws her on the couch. And then the action moved on somewhere else. And people, to this day, it makes my hair stand up. As people walked past this poor dead little Tweedle with her big pink wig, it was like watching people walk past a casket. They stopped. They put their hand on her. They moved. It was hair-raising. And they all hated the Red Queen after that. And in fact, going back to the idea of cruelty, I had a friend, kind of an ex-friend, because they were shocked that I would let something like that happen, and said that character was innocent and friendly and did nothing to deserve that. And I really question that you would include that in this performance. And the Red Queen, she got the March hare too. I mean, she was super bloodthirsty. But that was a line for this person. That was a line. And the line was, that's innocence and friendliness, and you gratuitously murdered her. And I don't like that. So, and fair game.
That's good writing. That's good performance.
These are people that I worked with over and over again, and they were absolutely fearless. They would. It isn't only about they would do anything. The reason they would do things is that we had that trust already, that I would never ask them to do anything that, and they were free to, to object to, I don't want to do that, or I don't, we had strong guidelines and we knew what we would do and what we wouldn't do. But being able to trust the people that you're working with and to trust the audience too, because there were parts in that performance where when the Red Queen is going after the March Hare, people physically stood between them to stop her. And as a director, then my role has to be, I have to get them out of there because this is choreographed and their presence will make a problem. Somebody could get hurt there was one fairly violent moment where a character gets their head slammed into a little tiny drinking fountain. Obviously, no one slammed into anything, but that's what it looks like, right? And that's what it sounds like. And I can't have people there because somebody really could get hurt. But I also don't want to break that enclosure that we have all created. This is real and happening right now. So I can't go, you can't do that. So I would have to try to get them away and say, this is not your fight, or, whatever, something to keep them in the mood, but to get them out of there. And because they got very strong at some, they weren't having it. They're like, I had enough of this violence, and and in fact, just the most telling, and it was a young person too, that was we did a beta night before the performance started, where local high school, their drama class came to observe and, be part of the performance. And at one point when in our version, the carpenter was God, was like the God figure. And at one point, as the March Hare is about to be killed, one of the students said to the carpenter, "Stop this. You can stop this. Make it stop." And she said, and this is totally unscripted, none of this, and he was dead serious. And she said, "It doesn't work that way." Wow. And when the kids left, they were dead silent. And I thought, oh God, what have we done? Have we wounded them? And silent as the grave. High school, nothing, zero. And I went out to the parking lot to make sure that everyone had got their rides home and stuff. And the drama teacher was still there. And she's like, "Oh my God, they couldn't shut up. They love this." And then when I came back in, I'm like, they're okay, everyone's okay. But how profound is that? To say, you can stop this, and to have her say, it doesn't work that way. Oh my God.
I wanted to jump in and say, Brennan, we're both writers. That's the greatest line you could write, in my opinion. Because, everyone, I see stories where people try to explain why, if God is real, then they do this for that reason. I don't think as human beings for any religion we can digest the reasons of the universe and everything. So that is the greatest line you could write as a god. That's impressive.
And to have it come off the cuff too.
Yeah.
And
wow.
to just be a response. And that was her completely honest response. At one of the nights before the March Hare was killed, he looked at the carpenter and said, "Was I good? Was I good?" It's like he knows he's going to die. And so he's asking God, was I good? Oh my God, right? It's
That's so sad.
This shit was deep. We had it. And none of this would have worked the same way if you didn't have that audience so close and so involved. None of this could happen. And that is ideally what you're doing with a book, right? That reader is that engaged in what you're doing and is bringing everything they've got to what you've done. And when it works,
I love that.
Yeah. And, the thought that's been kind of rolling in my head for the last couple minutes was, you mentioned that once the Tweedle was down for the count, that people were walking by, placing treating, her body like it was awake. like they had lost a friend. And I think that's such a tangible reaction to the way that we feel if that happens in a story we're reading. But the thing is, the author, the creator, never gets to see that. Whereas, in this sense, you've created an atmosphere where that is the case. So, big question, how do you recreate that in your writing where you can get that kind of feedback?
It's really doing this immersive work. And I started doing this about 10 years ago, the shows and stuff. It has really taught me a lot about engaging people and about making as much room as possible to, and giving people permission is the wrong word, but when I would do a performance, it was important to let people know that there were, especially people who had maybe never engaged in an immersive show before, to let them know that it wasn't like, a stupid free for all. And we were all, there were boundaries, and that we knew where they were, and that they were safe because we knew where they were, and we would stop them if we had to, or if things were not going to get totally out of hand, because it was a story and we were going to stay within that story and be respectful of it and respectful of each other. And knock wood, but I had never had any kind of problem with anybody at any of my performances, and because everyone was respecting that space. But it is about making, that's what I'm trying to do right now with Dark Factory. It's the story, as I said, is set in a club, and a lot of it is about the nature of what we believe is real, or what reality contains, and are we seeing or experiencing everything that's really there. And the touchstone for this came for me. I was, those days where you just can't anymore.
All too well.
I took a walk because I just couldn't anymore. And this was a couple years ago. And I'm walking down a street in my neighborhood, and I'm just pissed off. It's like, nobody even cares. Nobody even cares. Nobody cares about anything. Nothing. Nobody even says thank you. Nobody even notices what you do or says thank you. Nobody even says thank you. And there is a little piece of paper on the sidewalk. And I picked up the little piece of paper, and it said, "Thank you very much." And I dropped the paper. And I turned around and I went home. I went back to work. That is a true story. I have no explanation for that story. That is the thing that happened to me 2 blocks away from this house. And that made me think, not even what circumstances could have collaborated to have this little piece of paper on the sidewalk when I was walking by, and I could have just as easily walked over it, right? I was in a bitch mood. I was walking fast. So, but what collaborative circumstances came together that this was my thought, and that was the response of the visible world? And what if we are living in this world all the time, but we haven't quite opened up to that yet? And if those things are happening all around us, then what might that be like? And that's the idea behind Dark Factory. And the method of engagement is, I'm trying to create so much space, not only in the narrative, and I don't like to use narrative because it sounds so boring. In my narrative, what I'm trying to get across, it just sounds awful. But in the whole, and there will be a book, there will be an ebook, there will be an audiobook, there will be a site where people will be encouraged to collaborate with me on this. And that's the very long answer of, that's how I'm trying to make as much space as possible for as much engagement as people want to offer. Because too, I have seen in shows, sometimes people, the person who is just standing in the corner watching, that might be the way that they are most engaged. And if you try to force them to do stuff, that's wrong. That's not how I've been at those kind of shows where it's like, no, we're all gonna, no, we're not, you know, we don't all, why would we all experience this, we don't all experience life the same way. So why would you expect anybody, I want them to get as much as they can out of it, but the way they do that is up to them. So that's why this book will be out next year from Meerkat, and Trisha Reeks and I are talking about all the different ways to make this feel as real as an immersive experience as we possibly can.
That is, I want to touch on two things, if that's all right, Brennan. First is, as far as forcing people to do this or that, that's interesting. You talk about that. Just today, my wife and I were talking. She's a social worker. She's educating me on a lot of different, from neurodiversity to just how to approach life, I guess, in general. But that is a whole nother discussion. So as far as neurodiversity goes, we were just talking about today how it sucks that not everyone can be accepting of someone that, whether it be autism or like me with ADD or whomever else. There's so many things to list off that it sucks that if you're not this way, a lot of people try to force you into a round hole if you're a square peg, you know? The other thing I'm struggling to think about what it was because I'm getting lost in my other thoughts. So, Brennan, why don't you take over for now, sir?
I was kind of curious, what can you tell us about the website? I don't know if you're able to share anything about that yet, but what kind of interaction can people expect?
We are, and I'm not being coy, we are still developing the best ways. And a lot of this is back end stuff that just literally how will it be possible for people to engage? Like, how can they upload stuff? What is the best way to help people to be able to engage? One of the reasons that we decided to do it that way too is that when the cipher came out from Meerkat, the reissue, we did a fan art contest and said, you know, here, submit your fan art, okay? And we had no idea or no expectation of what people would do. And the entries were really stunning, and they were different mediums. There was 3D stuff. We were just blown away by what people came back with. It was, and I had to judge the contest because I opened my big yap and said, I'll be judged. And I'm like, oh, this is because Tricia said, I'll do it with you. I'm like, no, that's okay, I'll do it. And so it was hard. I mean, it's a cliche. They're all winners, but it's like I could have picked. It was super hard. And that made us think, here, look at the response that people had and that they wanted to share. Why can't maybe we can have like a permanent gallery of things that people share, or maybe people will want to share music because this is set in a dance club. Maybe they'll be inspired in music. Maybe people will want to make video. Maybe sky is literally the limit. And if that's the central idea, you could almost do anything. And so to make as much space as possible so that ideally that it will be, people sharing with each other as much as saying, this is a book, but this is a starting place too, for you to think about shit. And what do you think about it? At one of the shows that I did, it was a version of Wuthering Heights, which is probably my favorite book in the world. And it is my favorite book in the world. I have like 100 copies of it. It's probably my favorite book. I have like 17 copies of it. But we asked, the question there was, of the characters in the story, the one person who's like really the moral center of the story, Nellie, who is the narrator to us. And I first read that book when I was 10 years old. And when I realized at a certain point, Nellie could be lying. Oh God, it's like your mind is blown. You're like, oh, wait a minute, she's telling us a story, but wait, she said this here, but now she's, oh my God, what if she's lying? And so she's like supposed to be the moral center of the story, but she's very, compromised. And Heathcliff and Kathe are like the, you think of them as, oh, they're the tormented, lovers and blah, blah, blah. The worst thing that happens in that story is that somebody chooses to live in a way that's not authentic to her. It's like Kathe says, I'm going to marry the rich guy, and that's a disaster, and everybody ends up dead. Okay. So if the moral person who's been pushing her to do this, should you be doing the right thing or should you be doing the good thing? And on the wall, we did this show in a gallery, and we had written, the performers had taken parts of the book and written it all over the walls and the floor and stuff. And at one of the walls right by the door, I wanted people to write, should you do the right thing or the good thing? I mean, even if you just want to make a mark on the wall, what is better to do? And I couldn't think of a way to make the paint available to people. So we had it in like this little container, and we kind of offered it to the first person after the performance was over. And that was another moment where people just really took over, and it was almost like a church thing. Like they would use their finger and write on the wall and write what they had to say, and then give the bowl to the next person, and then take the rag. And it was and the things that people wrote were so deep. And one was, why do we have to choose? Why do we always have to choose? I mean, people wrote this, it killed me to have to paint over that when we left, but it's like, all this engagement is out there waiting, and people want to engage with work that they really like. I do, I mean, after I've read something or after I've watched something, I go and look, where are people talking about it? Where are their reviews? Where are their, is there Reddit? You want to engage, and we can do that now. And we can do it with anybody, anywhere. So why not make that available so we can do it? Plus it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, you just reminded me of that last thing that you were talking about, where you're talking about how there's another level of play in life. I'm wondering if you're meaning quite literally different dimensions that the human brain can't process, where, call it whatever you want, gods or other beings or whatever. I don't know what the right terminology would be, but is that kind of what you were getting at?
I think it could be. I think that the difference when you first have a big life experience, right? You fall in love, or you find something that means a great deal to you, or you go somewhere that changes you, it does feel like you have leveled up. It's like, wow, okay, now I have this other dimension in my life that I had no idea was there. And why we couldn't keep doing that or keep expanding outward. I don't think it's easier not to. And it is scary. I mean, what if it is a bad experience, right? I mean, what if you say, and then you're like, ooh, that was really bad, and now I'm fucked over and I can't think straight anymore, whatever. I think the name that is used for that sometimes, I mean, the idea of the numinous, the thing, it's like, it's spiritual, but it's not religious in any way. It has nothing to do with being religious. It has to do with, that feeling that there's more that could be available to us, but we're not, for whatever reason, we haven't accessed it yet. And I don't know why that couldn't be neurologically based.
Yeah, I don't either. I would think that would have to be. Brennan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think there's the first word that comes into mind with kind of where you left that, Kathe, was nirvana. There's so many kind of approaches to that from different cultures. Yeah, you're right. I don't see why it couldn't be neurologically based. Why it would have to be only accessible through, one kind of certain variation, I guess.
Right.
Like I said, it's an idea. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You can only feel this in this way and also see this way. Right. It doesn't make sense.
And it's also so culturally pervasive, going back to the, even when the world was a whole lot more separate and all these cultures thousands upon thousands of miles from each other that had either no or very, very limited interaction, kind of had ideas regarding that. You'd think there would have to be multiple ways, because we're not all going to arrive at the, the same destination and by the same means.
And you see the opposite happen, where there are the same idea expressed differently in all different cultures, like the idea of the beginning of everything as a seed of chaos, or the beginning of everything as darkness, right? And from that, what grows and what flowers and what comes into being. And that's in culture after culture after culture. And it's like, okay, this is clearly an idea that we're all having, but we're having it in different ways, and we're calling it different things, and we wear different clothes when we talk about it or whatever, but it's the same idea. And so when you're having the same idea, that has to have some kind of resonance for us as human people. It means something to us.
I'm thinking out loud. I don't know how you guys are going to take this, but I'm curious what, maybe not all, but some animals that we can't be the only species on this planet, or plants are living things, what they think of it. Life doesn't matter after, so on and so forth. I mean, think of trees. Some of them are hundreds of years old.
I'm reading this right now, and I highly recommend it. It's called Wonderland, and it's about, this guy goes to all different places underground in the world. The Paris catacombs, into underground rivers, goes into just anything that's underneath. He is going into and writes about it. He's a really good writer. It's a really good book. But I came to him through another guy who writes about mushrooms, and how I had no idea that mushrooms they're not really plants, and they're not animals. They're their own thing, and they're completely connected. And then when you look at trees and you find out, oh, trees are actually talking to each other through their roots. All the trees in a forest area can be in communication with each other. Mm-hmm. So what even are they saying? I mean, they're having some kind of language, right? Yep. When I see my cat looking out, my cat hates all other cats. So when I see him looking out the window, he hates them. They're all going to kill him. I don't know if you knew this, but they're all out to kill him particularly.
I read his tweet earlier.
He's just, he's got issues. But he will have these silent dialogues with other cats, right? I only understand them because I have looked up the body language and whatever, but they're having a conversation. It doesn't have jack to do with me, but they are definitely communicating, and trees are communicating. And he even talks about in this book about the ice, when he's out on a glacier, about the ice communicating, and it feels as if there's maybe not a language the way we would think of it, but there is this mode of communication between everything. And it makes no sense that we would be the only things, like you say, to talk or to have. We're not all that. I mean, we're part of stuff, but no.
Yeah, a few hundred years ago, we thought that Earth was the center of the universe, not this one system of planets and whatnot, but
the whole thing.
Not even the galaxy. Where the Milky Way is like, look at other galaxies compared to the Milky Way. We're not even a midget. We're barely a microscopic thing.
I know.
It's insane,
up, doesn't it? It's like we're so small.
We don't matter.
Right? We're just this tiny little thing. And to kind of, that to me has always seemed like whistling in the dark, right? It's like, we are the best. We are the supreme species. invented gods and gods care about what we do and we are the best. It's like, I would call that whistling past the graveyard. If you have ever really looked out and use a telescope sometime, you don't matter. We don't matter. We matter to each other and we matter, to whatever good that we can create. But yeah, in the big scheme of things,
Yeah.
take a seat. It just doesn't matter.
I sorry, Brennan. I was gonna say, I
Uh,
think that all secrets they're always under your nose. I think it's all around us, and I love that you were talking about the trees talking with each other because there are books on it that you can read. Just I don't know the name, the one I was thinking in particular, but I read this one little thing, and I wish I delved into it more before we talked. I didn't know we'd go in this direction, but it said that if this one tree in a network of a forest is lacking water for one reason or another, the others will take their supply and help that one. Just because it's funny, you hear from a lot of people that we're the only species that have stories. I've heard that. That can't be true. Like Native American, a lot of Native Americans they were just oral people that had their stories being told from generation to generation. Why aren't who's to say trees or apes or so forth aren't like that? I think we're the stupid ones, honestly. Just because we can't define it or understand it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right. And if it doesn't have resonance to us, then somehow it doesn't have value. It's like, oh, well, that's not. Someone had posted a picture earlier today in my feed of they work in a food place, and a goose is trying to build a nest out of like the trash and stuff by the dumpster. It's so sad. And people are like, that dumb goose. This goose is trying to live and trying to this is what we've left for her to try to make her nest for her babies, right? A bunch of fast food crap, right? It's not that goose. It's us. Number one, she shouldn't have to have babies next to a dumpster. And number two, that's on us.
Mm.
What do you want her to do, right? Go to Nest R Us and buy nesting material? Jesus Christ. I mean, have some responsibility. If you're going to wreck the whole world, at least own up to it. Good grief. Yeah, that was. And that takes us back to the idea of the innocent. I mean, these animals are just trying to exist in this world that we have basically moved in and taken over, right? It's like here we are. I'm going to put a dumpster over here. I know that you used to nest there, but I don't really care.
Yeah. Brennan, I got one more thing if it's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
On the subject of animals, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm being all like snooty or whatever, but me and my wife got a pet mini pig for almost 4 years ago. She's so fucking smart that I stopped. I eat seafood still. I can't help it. I'm a New England boy, so I eat seafood still. But beyond that, I don't eat meat. I can't look at cows the same. Chickens, none of that. I mean, I probably sound like a hypocrite where like I still eat meat, but I don't. That's where I draw the line, especially with pigs. They are so smart. It's
They're
insane.
incredibly smart. And they're I stopped eating anybody long time ago. And
Very emotional.
it is. And once you that is a line. Once you cross that line, you're like, okay, wait a minute. Why will I do anything for this cat in my house and, stop what I'm doing to tend to his needs or give him what he wants or make sure he has everything. But then I'm going to do this other thing to this other animal. Why? And it has become exponentially worse in the way that the animals are treated in factory farms. It's unbelievable.
Mm.
And that's cruelty too. And that's unnecessary cruelty. It's just to make money. It doesn't have anything with anything but making money and processing as many dead animals as you can. And once you make that connection, you're like, what is your mini pig's name?
It's Greta. I named my pets after musicians or bands. Hers is her name is after not Detroit but Michigan. I forget what town, but Greta Van Fleet.
Yes.
I think they kick ass. My favorite band's Led Zeppelin, and I thought that it was some stuff that Jimmy Page leaked. Was like, hey, guess what? We got more stuff, but it's just a bunch of kids in their late teens that kick major ass. So I'm like, I'm gonna name my pig after them. And then I got a chinchilla named Chester, named after, I love Lincoln Park, so it's named after Chester Bennington.
That's so cool. I know, and then once you know them and you understand their personalities, yeah, you can never look at them the same way again. You can never say, well, this one is okay, but that one is, yeah, I don't care what happens to that one. It's like, no, I care about all of them. And
I don't get in, like, I work with mostly guys, and I mean, I don't have to say any more than that. Anyone could expect how that environment is, and they're nice guys and stuff, but and not just there, but I mean, I don't care if someone eats meat, but it's just some people. It's like they have to go out of their way to be dicks about it. It's very
oh
strange.
yeah, no, and yeah, and I don't unfriend people, but I have done it a couple times just because of that. It's like, don't needle me, okay? Don't needle me. Or if you're going to needle me, then have the courage to keep going. Don't just kind of hit and run. And if you're going to do this, then come at me and then we'll have a discussion. But yeah, no, I don't preach at people because I don't think it works. And I don't think what made me stop was seeing a picture of a cow in distress. And I remember looking at this and the caption was, tears aren't enough, do more, go vegetarian. And I thought, fucking A, all right, you're right, I'm gonna stop now, I'll just stop. And so that, I mean, I know people don't like to see those images on the socials, and I understand. I don't want to see them either. If you did want to see them, wouldn't something be wrong with you? I mean, who would want to see that, right? But we don't want to look at it because we don't want to think that people are doing cruelty for us, because we won't. It's not like saying, well, I'm going to get my sledgehammer and go out and get a steak. I'm going to go kill that cow over there and I'm going to stake out tonight. But if you're paying somebody to do it for you, you're still complicit, and we don't want to be complicit in that. But you also don't want, the same way you don't want to see people sometimes when you've been a dick to them, you feel bad when it reminds you that you're a dick, and you don't want to, not that you guys are the dicks, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, when you know that you've done wrong to someone, it's hard to face them sometimes, and it takes an effort to face them, because you're like, I know I was wrong, and it doesn't feel good. But in this room, you guys can't see this room has a lot of props from my show, and there's a giant cow head there. There's a giant horse. He's half horse and half man. So there are a lot of animals in this room.
I would want to be in Kathe Koja's office just to check out all the shit that you got.
There's a lot of puppets and stuff in here. One of the shows that I did was based on my trilogy Under the Poppy, and it takes place in a Victorian whorehouse. And so there was a house in an old Victorian mansion in Detroit. The man had just bought it and was refurbishing it. It had never been empty, but the lady who owned it just before him had like carved it up into apartments and, kind of changed some of the original stuff. And he was restoring it all back to the way it was. So it was super cool. But it was still in a state of being kind of half torn up and half not. So when we used it, the story is supposed to be set in this kind of dicey brothel in wartime. And so the place did look kind of torn up in places and stuff. And one of the great moments from the show was another one of those moments of engagement. It's a 3-story house. And so you could follow the actors around while they were doing their thing and have that narrative, or you could walk around yourself and look at stuff. So at one point I was standing on the 2nd floor, and we called it the floozy room because all the brothel workers, their room was upstairs, and the action was moving from there to down the stairs, but not all the characters had come down, and the main characters came down, and then all the people came down. And I was standing on the stairs and I saw this woman. She was coming down the stairs and she looked and she heard a noise from upstairs. And she looked down and she heard the noise and she decided for herself, I want to go upstairs and see what's going on. And she ran up the stairs to see what was happening up there. And I thought, that was my first big show. And I was like, oh, my heart, this is what I wanted to see. This is how I know that it works. And in fact, there was another moment that just indulged me because this is a story that I love to tell. It was
Keep talking. We love
that
it.
same show. And one of the characters, the bad guy in the show, is in love with the man who owns the brothel and who is in love with somebody else, with this guy who came back to town and, you know, hijinks are ensuing. And so they're having a show here and the bad guy knows that this guy that he is sweet on this other guy. And he's like really hacked off about it. So he calls one of the brothel workers, this young man, and makes him go upstairs. Okay. And we're all downstairs on the main floor. And then you start hearing sounds from up there, like someone's getting hurt. And the characters are all like looking at each other. And the people are like, and they're looking to those, like, for a clue, like you would, right? Like, shouldn't somebody do something about that? What should we do? And every night there would be one or two, very few, never more than two. Someone would go up the stairs to see. And one night, it was a person that I actually know in real life. And she went up the stairs and the two performers they were supposed to get louder and louder and then like stop abruptly. Okay. And they never knew what was happening on the other side of the door. So she goes up the stairs to this room and the bad guy comes out and he slams open the door and he has a stick pin and he takes a hanky out and cleans it off and throws the hanky at her and walks away. And she looks and in the room is the young guy who's just been brutalized. And she picks up the hanky and goes to him and he says, thank you. I'm like, this is so great. This is so great. And then he went downstairs and she went downstairs and I went downstairs. None of us said anything. It was like, it was this perfect moment where, and nobody saw it but us, right? Nobody saw it. Nobody was privy to it, just us. And it could never have happened. It seemed inevitable, like it could never have happened any other way, but yet there could have been nobody there. They could have finished, you know, making their horrible noise and go, all right, let's go. But that's how it happened. And we all picked up each other's cues and it was brilliant. It was brilliant. And that kind of stuff, that is available to us in daily life too. I mean, those kinds of cues and stuff are happening all the time. And literally everybody has a story like that. Everyone has a story.
Do you have cameras set up where you guys get to record all that?
No, because there's no way. You could have the footage, but if you started cutting it together, then you're telling people where to look. And that's not possible. Right? Then it kind of defeats the purpose. I know we thought, is there a way to do this? And there never was. Then it's just a film, you know, that, I mean, it's a good film, but it would never be the same. And you have to be there. You have to be, because that's the whole part. We have to be part of it. Make anything work. If you're reading a book and you're not invested in it, that's why I stopped reading books when I don't like them. I used to try to like plow through. I'm not even really there. So what's the point, right? Why am I reading this if I'm not really there? Or worse yet, if I actively dislike it, you know, man, don't hate read. That's bad. Don't hate read.
Yeah, I know reviewers that do that, and I stopped doing that. It's not fun. I'm not even getting paid.
Yeah.
It isn't. No, and it isn't fun, and it isn't. Yeah, it's awful. It's like you're giving your energy to something you don't even like. Yeah.
Brendan,
I was just, when you were telling about, that how that story could have gone in so many directions, but the direction it took was perfect. I for some reason, like the term that just kind of pops into my head is just like storytelling as a team sport. Um, it's I've just never thought of it in that manner. It's so interesting. As a writer, I think of it as this like isolated activity. Even when, if I'm collaborating with somebody, it's I do my part, you do yours. Maybe we text a little bit and we talk about what we're going to do next, but there's still such a sense of isolation there. To turn it into a team sport, that's wild. I've never really thought of immersion working in that way.
And it takes a lot of trust too, because it is a collaboration and it doesn't work all the time. And sometimes people that you think you can work with, you find out you can't. You're just, I imagine it must be like being in a band. You think you're going to vibe with someone and then you don't, and it's not there. One of the things we used to say at rehearsals always was, if we stop having fun, then, and I have always thought this about my work, if I'm not having fun with it, something's wrong. I mean, it's gone off the rails, or something's not right. And we would stop and say, well, let's go back to when did we start getting boring, or when did things start feeling wrong, or because then you're not in that, whatever the vibe is, you're not in the zone, you don't have flow, or whatever it's called. It's not working. In any piece of fiction too, any one of us have felt that, right? You're trying to write something and it's like,
Yeah.
it ain't happening. Get rid of that. Yeah. There are books in that closet there that never got born because they could never, either the material, I wasn't good enough to handle it, or something was wrong, and I used to try to force it. I'm gonna do this. And then you're like, you're not gonna force anything, you're gonna sit there and sweat. Just give it up. It'll come back maybe, or maybe not. Maybe you never can do that.
I'd
Yeah.
imagine like forcing a book would be a lot like forcing yourself to read a book that you're not into. It's going to be a slog, and you're going to get to the end and say, "Well, that was shit." Um,
There's some days
you're
I
right.
might never get back, and for nothing. And who else is going to enjoy it either?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
If you don't like what you're working on, who the hell else is going to like it or enjoy it?
Now, I'm sure you've talked about the cipher to death, but and maybe you've talked about this and I missed it. But I am interested about the genesis of the cipher, specifically on how you got it published with Dell.
Right.
Isn't that correct? Okay.
Mhm.
I'm curious how you got hooked up with them. Please feel free to like give a synopsis for potential readers. But I'm curious about the side of the behind the scenes. How it got started. Was there an agent involved? I know your first novel was published. How you felt, and pretty much how the reception was. Anything you want to talk about or more, please feel free.
It was it started out as something completely different. It started out as a continuation of a short story that I had written, excuse me, called Distances. And that was super well received, and it was in some year's best collections and stuff, and it did well. So my agent at the time said, maybe there is more there. Maybe you would like to expand that, or, take a look at it. And I started working on it, and that was something that I was not able to make work. It's like, there's something wrong here. This isn't working. So there was one character in there that I had some resonance with, and that ended up being Nicholas, who's the main character of the cipher. And once I had Nicholas, then things went very quickly. Then I knew that there was someone called Nakota who was involved with him in some fashion. And then there was the fun hole, and we were off to the races. So once I was able to clear away the thing that wasn't going to happen, I could start working on the thing that did. And I finished the book and I gave it to Russell Galen, was my agent at the time. And he had a memorable comment. He said, Kathe, if you have balls enough to write this, I have balls enough to sell it.
That's awesome.
Isn't it great? And Gene Cavellis was creating the Abyss line for Dell at the time and was really serious about looking for things that were different and were a way to take horror fiction in a direction that she felt, and she was right, it needed to go, and there needed to be room for that kind of fiction. And their promo material talked about, we've had enough of the plots that we all know, and let's see some things that we don't know. And so Russell was able to place the book with her. And for someone, like we talked about at the beginning, someone coming into a genre, it was fantastic to be able to be welcomed into this arena, with this, there were so many great writers involved at that line. Billy Martin was part of it. Brian Hodge was part of it. Nancy Holder was part of it. Melanie Tam. I mean, there were so many good writers. And to be able to be part of that experiment, and Gene Cavellis worked really hard to make that happen and to really be a line that you could feel like even if you didn't know the writer, like that was my first novel, even if, and it was also the inaugural title in the line too. So she really clearly believed in the book and clearly believed in it as, the flagship for the line, and which took a lot of courage on her part as an editor. I mean, that is not the usual thing to do. So I respect her a lot for that. I didn't understand as much as I do now about that conversation with readers. So I didn't know what to expect. And it did get a lot of really good reviews, but it got a lot of attention for the line too, which was really what I believe what Gene wanted was to say, here's something that's different and we want to do different things. So this is why we're choosing this to be the first book in the line. And it was great to have people reading something, paying that much attention to a new novelist and a new novel. I was just delighted. I thought it shared a Stoker with Melanie Tam. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Happy about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really, I didn't have anything to compare it to then. So I don't know if I understood how kind of charmed the experience was. I did not. I didn't know. This was my first novel. So, but it was a really great way to come into publishing. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the indie presses now that make me think of writers like that, writers that I, broke in with, and people who are doing really interesting things. It isn't only the indie press. A book that I recommend all the time that I love to pieces is Maurice Meyer's The Seventh Mansion, which was on the Stoker preliminary ballot. But yeah, I love Maurice's work, and her voice is not like anybody else's. And I think books like that can help us expand the idea of what can fit in a genre, or, and that's what the whole Delibis thing too was like. We're going to expand, not in a way saying we're going to expand this genre, but it's like, it can be a lot of things. We don't have to only call it one thing. It can be anything it wants. If readers will accept it, why not? Why not give people the opportunity to find their own darkness in these different kinds of books and these different kind of experiences?
This episode's interesting. We followed one theme, which the way I'm registering this in real time is the theme of tonight is cruelty and understanding. Well, I guess that'd be two themes, or if you want to mix it up. But going along with what you were just saying, the elasticity of the genre, yeah, it's horror. That's just an emotion. It's more than just like these shelves are what horror is. It's just a few examples. Yeah, that's great. Do you mind plugging a few authors in the indie side of things that are speaking to you along those lines?
I just finished reading Lindsay Lerman's I'm From Nowhere, and I thought that was just brilliant. I love her voice. And I always read, I will read anything if the voice is strong enough. If it doesn't matter to me what genre it is, I will read anything, anywhere, because the voice is how I make a connection and how I can be pulled into something. And I mean, even, Underland, I'm not a fan of the underground, but I am a fan of this guy's writing, and I want to read the way he writes and the way he communicates. I have receptors for that. I think sometimes too, as readers, we forget, or maybe we don't honor is not the word that I want, but maybe we don't respect our own receptors enough, because everybody's had that experience where someone is giving you a book and going, oh my God, you will love this, you should read it. And you start reading it and you're like, oh, boy, this is not for me. And then you start doubting yourself and thinking, well, everyone you know what I mean? It's like, everyone likes this. Why don't I like this? Or what? But things can be good and you can just have no receptors for them too. I mean, I have no receptors for opera. I have been to the opera. I don't like it. I'm glad it exists, but it doesn't exist for me. I don't have those receptors. So I'm never going to be able to get anything out of it. I feel that way about a lot of things. I mean, even things like different sports. It's like, I will never watch golf. There is not a golf game that can exist that I'll watch hockey, but I watch no golf. I mean,
What about Happy Gilmore? That's got hockey in it too, Kathy.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah. I'm only kidding.
Things objectively are good,
Yeah.
but you're like, they're just not for me. I'm never going to like them. And sometimes I feel bad if I can't buy into somebody's work in that way, that I can't. But I know that I'm not going to, at this late date, if I don't have the receptors for something, I'm never going to have it. So there's no point. I like Maurice's work an awful lot. I'm a huge fan of hers. Another book of hers, which came out before Seventh Mansion, is Heartbreaker. It's a short story collection. She and I recently did a thing with University of Pittsburgh where we each read, we did a Zoom thing where we each read each other's work, but we didn't know what the other person was going to read. So she read a passage from Strange Angels, which was a book of mine that was very important to her. And I read a story of hers that's in this book called Whole Life Ahead. And I thought I had a bookmark, but I don't. But the theme of that thing that we did for Pitt was talking about women in horror and how do you define that, or where's that line, or where's, whatever. And yeah, I read this because it was to me, it was one of the most perfect illustrations of, it's called Whole Life Ahead. And it's this young woman who is dead and she has come back to life with this guy has like somehow helped her come back to life. And it's all about how the whole story is about the constant violence against women, constant violence. And nothing happens in the story, nothing violent happens, nothing bad happens, but it's shocking to read. And it starts out, I'm so cold, she says, the first thing, her voice small and far away. And he doesn't know if she is saying it to him or if it is something she has been saying for a long time before he got here. It's me, he tells her, and puts his hands on her arms. When she moves, dirt falls on her shoulders, skips down her dress. Her back is only bones, skin shrunk against them like leather. But he doesn't mind. He expected worse. It just goes on like that. It's like, but this is not necessarily a book that people would pick up and go, well, that looks like, you know what I mean? You might never look at this and say, this has anything to do with horror. This looks like, well, this is contemporary fiction. You know, I don't want that, or I do want that, or whatever. But it's very much at home in the darkness. And to me, that's the definition of horror, I think. That's why I've always thought that my novel Kink was absolutely a horror novel, because it's so much about it. And that is about cruelty too. Darkness, and how comfortable are you in existing or operating in the darkness. And it isn't even necessarily about fear as much as it is about, you know, the dark, the transgression, the going places, like all of a sudden, you know, it gets dark in a room. All of a sudden, something happens that you didn't expect, or something, you know, the phone call comes that you didn't expect, and now everything is fucked. Wow, what are you gonna do? That's elastic. That can encompass so many books and so many writers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have to have some kind of genre, the same way that we don't have all the food in the grocery store, like all under a sign that says food, and then it would take you like forever to find your Rice Krispies. You're like, fuck it. So you have to have some kind of meaningful way to categorize stuff, but it can be such an offense that, you know, will scare people away, or people think they're, you know, ooh, I don't read horror because, you know, what? Yeah, you do. I bet you if I went in your house, I bet you I'd find some, but you don't, you know, you don't think of it that way. And you think of whatever that is like it's something that's weird or creepy or beneath you, or.
It's usually like guts and blood when people say I don't like horror. Well, that's one subgenre.
Right. But they've just like, oh, I don't like that. And they never bother to learn anymore. So I know that's the sad part about genre, because it is used, or sometimes it is even used within genre when people going, oh, that's not horror. You know, you guys, come on. Everything that we do is fine. Everything, if it's good work, it's enriching what we all do. That's period. That's the end.
Absolutely.
If it's bad work.
I agree. Brennan.
Yeah. No, I really like that. Everything that we do is fine. You know, I always kind of think of horror as, you know, less of a main dish and more of a spice. You know, you can sprinkle it on everything. And you probably should, because it adds humanity, it adds conflict, it adds, you know, life is dark. Let's face it. It's not all sunshine and roses, and if it is, I want to know where you're living, because I'm not fucking there. You know, it's a necessary component to good storytelling in small doses, at least small doses. So that's where I'm at with it.
And it's hard to trust anything that doesn't have that darkness, because, right, it's like, okay, where are you living, right? Like you just said, what world are you inhabiting that doesn't have that pain or that edge where you can just fall off? I mean, are you existing in some kind of, I know some people want to go to fiction or art or whatever for reassurance, but I don't see how you can be reassured without that darkness. I mean, it's not acknowledging that it even exists, right?
You have no reference point.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like when people try to protect their kids from everything, it's like, that doesn't make them safe. That makes them less safe.
Super vulnerable.
Right. There is no way to actively, they're going to meet it somewhere. You better give them a way to meet it, because you're not going to be there every minute. And I guarantee you that any kid on any playground has seen things happen that you don't know about, Mom and Dad, and you better give them a way to meet that. And
They've all heard the F word.
they said it too.
You know,
first.
I was gonna say, like, even if you use fiction as an escape, which is totally legitimate, you should absolutely do that. I don't think it's possible without some sort of grounding. And going back to that middle school story, where you put, you wrote a book that was for young adults and you put the word fuck in it because it was appropriate to that situation. To me, if I'm that age or if I'm this age and I'm reading that and the character goes, "Ah, poppycock," you're all of a sudden you've lost me. But the second they have a valid reaction and they react to a situation the way I would as a 13-year-old, I can believe in the flying unicorn above or whatever the hell it is, as
Absolutely.
long as there's something to kind of tie me to my own life experience.
And to show me that as a writer what it's like, and then I can trust you, because otherwise I can't write. And that was one of my arguments too. It's like, what else would this kid have said? It's at a moment of high stress, something bad has happened to a friend of his. He feels like all the adults have let them down, and he's confronting one of these adults. I mean, right, he's not going to say, "Shucky darns, fellow, you're really," it's like, fuck you.
Gee whiz.
I know. Gosh darn it. I mean, it makes no sense. And
Yeah.
it's not, it's so far removed that you might as well, you're so clearly been talking at someone. And I wouldn't do that. I don't want books to talk at me. I don't want films to talk at me. I'm perfectly capable of making up my own mind, but you have to talk to me, not at me. And the young readers are all the same. It's rereading Harriet the Spy, which I did recently. It's totally different reading it now because I can see things in Harriet that I couldn't when I was reading it as a kid. And she is a real butt for parts of this book. This kid is a butt, but she's so real. She's so real. And as a kid, I enjoyed her buddiness. And as an adult, I can understand it. And I see where she's coming from. But that's why that book has been alive for so long, because it's real, because you can look at it and see yourself in it. Even if you can't stand Harriet, you can still see that she's a real person. She feels real to you.
I like the movie. Was it the 90s? 96? Harriet the Spy?
I never saw it. I couldn't bear it because I love the book. I was afraid. It's like every Wuthering Heights movie sucks. There's never been a good one. There's one by Andrea Arnold that got the atmosphere right, because so much of that book is about being outside, living outside, running around outside. I mean, at one point in the book, Kathe talks about herself and says she's half savage, hardy, and free because they're outside running around. It's not about people sitting in a drawing room, right? The Andrea Arnold one had the appropriate, dirt and grit, and it felt real again. It felt real. But then they opened their mouths and things
Dropped the ball.
Style.
So that was our first reading, by the way. This is the 84th recorded episode, and I liked it. It's good. So, Kathe Koja's reading, that was awesome. So I wanted to point that out. Brennan, are we ready to do What Are You Reading?
Yeah, sure.
Kathe, what are you reading right now that you've already told us, I think, but if there's anything
else. I already shot my watch. I love the Lindsay Lerman book. I am loving Wonderland. This is a book that I read, and this is so cool because this is another thing. It's called The Song of Achilles, and apparently it was like a giant bestseller like 5 years ago or whatever. I had no idea it existed. I didn't know anything about it. Okay, I somehow stumbled on a Twitter bot that was quoting from the book, and it intrigued me, and so I picked it up and I read it. I get everything on interlibrary loan, and if I really like it, I'll buy it because I am getting to a point in my life where I have so many books, I can't have any more books. But I love this book. I never thought about Achilles or his life or his heel or any of his problems. I didn't care one way or another. It's like, I don't care. And then I read this book and the voice was so great. It's like, okay, I have to own this book because I love it so much. So yeah, it's a subject I had no interest in until I cared passionately. What's another good example? I know it's in this room somewhere. I saw the film last year, the Old Guard. There it is. This, if all these books fall down, I'm serious, you gotta edit this out, because this is like a house of cards here.
No problem.
I loved this book so much, and I am not a fan of graphic novels, and I'm not a fan of superhero stuff. And I think I watched the movie, we watched it, it was another bad political day, and I said, all right, what is this about? It's about Charlize Theron is going to kick somebody's ass. All right, I'm down for that. Let's watch her beat some people up, because that's where I'm at today. And it was so good, because it took the whole superhero idea. These people are, they are not immortal, but they live a long time. And if they're wounded in any way, they heal up. So it isn't that they're not hurt and that they don't have. That's what is also great about this. It's not like bullets bounce off them. Bullets go in them, and then they heal from that, and then they get up and go on. But what the director did in the film was take that whole superhero idea and make it about, there was no wisecracking. It was about these people, and you really were interested in them. The idea was, there are this group of people who go around like righting wrongs and stuff. And one of them, the oldest one, is really sick of doing this, because she's been righting wrongs for so many years, and there's still so many wrongs, and she's really over it. And then they discover a new one like them. And oh my gosh, what are we going to do about this? And we have to get her. And I liked the film so much that I said, all right, I have to look at the book. I have to read it, even though I can't stand graphic novels. I have a problem with them because of the word balloons and stuff, and the separation of the words and the pictures is hard for me, because it takes me out of the story. But I was willing to forego that. It's like, okay, I know you have this prejudice, but you're going to read this anyway. And then it blew my prejudice away. It's like, no, you're just wrong, and this is great. And now you learned a whole different way to read. Good for you. Now you can read this as a narrative, and it doesn't bother you that they're word balloons. So yeah, that was my other, what was I reading? And apparently there will be a sequel to the film, which I am very excited about, and I'm going to watch the hell out of it.
I gotta check that out. That sounds awesome.
It's really good, and it has lots of great. It's good, really good action movie.
I want to get more into graphic novels. They always catch my eye. Just never. I've only read one, so I kind of want to up that. And you just convinced me to up that. So, Brennan, what are you reading?
Kathe, you used the phrase whistling past the graveyard earlier. I'm reading a book called Whistling Past the Graveyard by Lex H. Jones. It's a short story collection, and honestly, I'm really loving it. It's one of those, every once in a while I feel like most short story collections, there are some that really catch your eye, and other stories in there where it's like, oh, that was fine. And you get through, you read 12 stories, and you have fond memories of like 8 of them. This one, everyone has, something memorable. They're just, every story is so complete. I can't think of a better way to put it. Like it could, I haven't hit one story yet that couldn't be its own little universe. So I'm about 60% through, and unless it takes a real nosedive at the end.
No, it doesn't.
I'm loving. Okay,
I finished it. It doesn't.
I'm loving it. That's 5 stars for me. Because that is really hard to find a collection where every single piece works for you.
It is really hard, and must be super well put together. Because that's a tough thing to pull off.
He did a really good job, and I know Patrick is a little more familiar with his writing than I am, but I'm impressed. This is the first thing I've read by him.
Yeah, he's like one of the most polite human beings I've ever met. It's like him and Ramsey Campbell. They're both English, so I guess that's why. Yep. I don't know.
Speaking of English, I'm about to start. A friend of the show, Janine Pipe, has a collection coming out beginning of May, and I'm about to start that. It's called Twisted Tainted Tales, and I like her. She's got she's not afraid to throw the blood around. She puts together a really good fun read.
Really nice person too.
Yeah.
So I'm reading a classic for our Brighting Minds along with the guy that runs Silver Shamrock Publishing, Kim McKinley, and a reviewer known as Well Red Beard, Kevin Witten. We're going to be doing the Shirley Jackson's probably most notorious work, or one of them, The Haunting of Hill House. First time I'm reading it, it's really good.
Oh my God. That
I'm
is
going.
book.
I'm gonna make sure I read the collection with the lottery in it too before we record because I keep hearing about it. I gotta read that.
I don't know how you missed that in high school. You must have been out that day.
Man,
I don't think you can graduate without reading the lottery.
Come on, I told you in high school that's when I stopped reading for like 5 years because I felt like an idiot because of all the stuff that they kept trying to make me read. With the exception of 2 books, Great Gatsby and Animal Farm. I love those 2 books. I'm also reading Ronald Kelly's his first novel. It was with Zebra Books in '91, Hindsight. That's fun. Just about a Southern girl from Tennessee that has the gift/curse of seeing the future of certain people. It's usually about death. One more, Sina Pelayo, a Latinx writer. She just came out with Children of Chicago. I love her stuff. She sent me the poetry collection, Into the Forest and all the way through. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna start that probably tonight. She's become one of my favorite writers. She's so good. I said this on when we recorded an episode last night. It'll be coming out 3 days after your episode, Kathe, with Clash Books founders, Liza and Christoph. But she's the only author I've ever compared to Thomas Harris. Probably because they're both journalists. Probably because they both were journalists covering true crime. But it's more than that. They are just, oh my God, Cena's so good. She's gonna blow up. Like she's bound for great things.
Good. Yeah.
So
she's super cool too. She's a cool person. I got to meet her at StokerCon. Whatever year that was, we live in the endless time now. We're not in 2019. Yeah, it's been a long few years.
Well, 2019 was that in England?
No, it was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is frightening in its own way. Sorry, Grand Rapids, you know it's true. So,
where can people follow you?
they can follow me on Twitter, and they can find me on Facebook, and they can go to KatheKoja.com.
And I have to ask, what's on your corkboard screw behind you? Because like I love everything that's going on.
Oh, lots of stuff. This is Dark Factory. That's what people will see on the site. And all of this is all Dark Factory related. So it's all about seeing things differently. And that's, can you see, can you see this? No, yes, no.
No, I can't see.
There are posters from art that artists have already done that pertain to the book and will be part of the site. I'm not sure how much of this will be part of the book and how much will be part of the site, but yeah, everything is Dark Factory related. So
very cool. Not to be rude, but I took a picture and just sent it I just texted Cena and I said, "Do you have anything to tell Kathe?" And she said, "Tell her I absolutely love her work, and she's an inspiration. It means so much to me." So directly from Cena, I love it. I love when great people, never mind, add to that authors appreciate and love each other. It's so cool to see that.
it is cool, and it's a chance. She and I mean, this is another one of the gifts of the genre, right? We would not have met if we would not have been doing this thing at the same time. And that, in fact, that's how I met the goddess of Clash Books, right? We were at
Liza, yep.
We were at StokerCon and we just started to talk. I love what she's doing. I love what they're doing. And just without regard. And it's when she talks about genre, she's like, all genres must be blown up, and that's that.
That sounds like her.
That's
No, like, yeah, no, they're for jerks. Don't have them. But she's really fearless and trusts her taste, and Christoph too. They trust what they're doing, and they trust that by putting it out there. That's what I like about working with Meerkat too. And Trisha Reeks is the same way. She is willing. She doesn't have any fences to say, oh, I won't do that, or I won't do that. She trusts good work to be what it is, and trusts herself to recognize it and put it out in the world. So I'm seeing so much of that energy in indie presses, where I see when I look at the big houses, and I have worked for a lot of different publishers and have had mostly good experiences with all of them. But the more the large houses consolidate and get larger and larger, I can't see how that is helpful to writers or readers. It's making taller fences, right? It's might make it a lot harder to get work out that is different, that is, how is a Jean Cavellis type editor going to function when she's part of, this striation, layer upon layer upon layer, that she has to push through something new. And I mean, it was hard enough for her to do it back in the day, but she was able to make it happen.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's people like her that they're the unsung heroes. They're the type of people I want on this show too. I don't know who they are though most of the time. I gotta talk to people like you who mention them, and man, I wish I knew more behind the scenes people. Like Don Daria, we had him on, and I only knew of him because of how much praise he got from Brian Keene and other writers that I started talking with. Like, they make this actually happen. You need someone to do the technical side of things to make that author's work come in front of your eyes.
Especially now when there's so much stuff.
Yeah, so much.
By stuff, and you don't even, it is like the supermarket of all the food, and you're like, I don't even know. It's like when I go to Home Depot, which I don't go to Home Depot anymore because they have political issues, but when I did, or when you go to any big store like that and you're like, I just really wanted some paint, but now I'm being confronted with things like, maybe I do need mildew resistant paint. I don't know. Is there mildew in there? Maybe I should get that. And then you end up like confused and defeated, and you just leave. You don't buy any paint. You're like, all right, fuck it, I just won't paint. I'm gonna do it. I won't do it. Right. If you don't have someone curating your experience of a reader, how are you might not find the things, right? That's why a place like Clash is so great, or like Meerkat, because you can trust the people who are curating it. You might not love every single thing they do, but you would take a chance on any of it because you trust their taste, right? You're like, okay, I know you and I know your taste, and so I'll take a flyer at anything you show me.
I was going to ask you about Meerkat, if you got anything to say for authors looking for a home. That's a pretty damn good reason.
Oh yeah, I have been so impressed with Trisha's bravery. And I mean, a project like Dark Factory is more than just saying, okay, we're going to publish this book and like slap a cover on it and send it into the world. It has been so collaborative, and I am so happy with everything that we've done together. I was happy from the minute I saw this cover for Velocities, and she's like, okay, here are our ideas. I'm like, yeah, I like that a lot. And I did the keynote for Small Fair earlier this year, and Trisha and I did a Q&A together. And she talked about wanting to have the author involved in things, because not only is it your book, you are supposed to have a vision for what you're doing, and that should carry through in, the way the book looks. And that isn't true. For a lot of writers, you find out what the cover is when you get it from marketing and go, hey, here's your cover. And you're like, ooh, okay. Oh, it sure does have my name on it. All right. Okay. to do anything now. I guess I just have to like it. And yeah, and that has not been that opposite experience with Trisha. So
we've been talking for 2 hours and we haven't even touched on Velocity. So is there anything that you want?
is it 2 hours? All right. See, it's late. I'm usually in bed by now.
You know what? We're wrapping up, but I'm so sorry. Is there anything that you want to talk about for Velocities because this is your brand new book?
Yeah, this was my second short fiction collection, and it is hard. It's really hard to put together a collection that hangs together, like you were saying about Whistling Past the Graveyard, to have something that is cohesive, where every story is like in dialogue with the story. That's hard to do. So I try to think of a way to give people a way through the book, or offer a way through the book, and say, okay, if you don't, maybe you want to experience the stories as a unit, or maybe you want to read some of them, or maybe you just want to read one and put it down. So I broke it up into sections. One is called At Home, one is Downtown, one is On the Way, one is Over There, and the last one is Inside. And gave people that kind of thematic way through, because the stories are all over the place. There are horror stories in here. There's historical fiction. There's things that have no name. The stories that have no name, but magic realism, although I don't like that term, but they're all over. So I wanted to give people a way through it that might make, and with any short fiction, I never sit down and read the whole thing. It's like you read a couple stories and then you let them kind of sit and say, oh, what did I think about that? Or maybe go back and read it again. Did I get all of that? Did I get everything that was there? And it had been a long time since my first collection came out, a long time ago. And I hadn't done another one. And I thought, okay, well, maybe, and people ask, are you ever gonna, and I have a lot of short fiction. Someday there should be like all of them collected, but not today. Not tonight. But it was fun to look at the stories in the first book, and then the stories that was called Extremities, and this is Velocities. And there's one story that is in both books, and a couple of reviewers pointed that out with a certain amount of irritation and said, basically, bitch, you have had 2 short fiction collections out in 20 years, and you are repeating a story. What even are you doing? But I did it on purpose because, well, of course I did it on purpose. It wasn't, oh shit. Where, how did that get in there? But it read so differently to me looking at it again, because I went back and looked at what was in Extremities and tried to figure out, okay, how did we put this together? And the story is called Pas de Deux, and it's the last story in the book. And it read so differently to me reading it now from reading it then, that I knew that I had to put it in there, because it was like a totally different story. The same way, in some ways, The Cipher is a totally different book for me, looking at it now as opposed to, and I have my own ideas about The Cipher, and I never share them because I don't want people to think they have any more weight than anybody else's, because they don't. When the writer says, well, it was really, then people are like, maybe it's not about that. That's what it's about to me. But that doesn't have anything to do with anything. I can't believe we talked for 2 hours. It went by like that.
Well, there's a lot more we could cover, so we'd love you to come back sometime. Brennan, before I jump into wrapping up with final thoughts, is there anything? No, actually, why don't I ask you when we have final thoughts? Sorry. Just want. Sorry, my brain's starting to get a little fizzled right now from talking late at night. Silliness is coming out of my mouth. So for those that are interested in looking at merchandise with my ugly mug on a t-shirt, coffee mug, a few other things, go to deadheadspace.com. There is a store tab. Check it out. If you like it, great. If not, well, don't tell me. Final thoughts, Kathe.
Oh, this was super fun. And I think this is the perfect illustration of what a conversation is supposed to be. We went all over the place, and yet we kept coming back to the same ideas and the same exploration. And I mean, that is what good fiction is supposed to do. That's what a good conversation is. You start here and you go everywhere. And I did not knock this shelf over. I am not kidding. This is a very volatile shelf here and why I have glass stuff on the top shelf is really beyond me. That is an accident waiting to happen. So we managed to get through 2 hours, and I pulled out a bunch of books and I wrecked nothing. So I'm super proud of that.
Audio listeners, you'll have to watch the video version to see her shelf. It's there's a lot of books on it. Brennan, final thoughts, sir.
And there's no edits when all the books toppled and fell on poor Kathe. So, I agree with you. And it's weird agreeing with you about the conversational nature, because it just sounds like I'm touting our show. But you're right. It's this was a great conversation. I came prepared with notes, with questions, and you can see my book is now closed because that was the areas we went and the rabbit holes we dove down were so interesting that I wasn't about to interrupt them to, throw whatever I wrote down, hours or days ago. I loved it, and we would love to have you back.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. I want to get Kathe on a round table. I don't know about what, I don't know with who, but like me and Brennan tried doing a few each year. I don't know what's going to be on, but I'm definitely going to hit you up for that.
Yeah.
So my final thoughts are, Kathe made me, I'm saying this to Brennan, really anyone else, and you too, Kathe, is I put out a call. I said, fuck it. Maybe some people will reply that I'm not even thinking of. I put out a call at the end of season 1, for people that may have interest in being a guest on our podcast. And Kathe was one of them. And I texted Brennan, like, holy shit, Kathe Koja just replied. What's wrong with her? What does she know? Is she desperate? No, but seriously, you made me determine that I'm going to keep doing that at the end of every season. Me and Brennan plan on going for years, so I'm going to keep trying it. I got you interested, a guy named Shane Hawk, and a few others that, if I didn't make that call, would we have ever talked? I don't know. So I got to thank you for that. That's pretty awesome. And this has been a fantastic conversation.
And you should always, I think we do sometimes censor, like, oh, I'm not going to ask that person. I do it. It's like, I would like, oh, I'm not going to say anything to her because I don't know her. Or like, I'll just stalk her on Twitter and look at her stuff. There are people that I'm afraid to say anything to because of that, because it's like, they don't want to hear from me. Why would I, I'm not going to. But it's almost, I can't think of a time when I have approached someone honestly with honest, I would like you to be part of this, or I admire your work or whatever. People respond, Unless maybe I just have not approached any, big dicks or anything, but because you're having that honest connection again. You're right. Something you did really meant something to me. And even if they don't respond, you honestly told them. How could anybody be offended by that, right? It's like, I really like what you're doing, and yeah, that's otherwise. Why is anyone doing anything if we don't want to have a connection?
Exactly.
Oh, why bother?
It's called social media, be social.
Really?
I sent a tweet. This is public, so, this isn't news now. Well, it might be for some people, but I sent a tweet to Peter Straub saying, hey, we would love to have you on, fans and so forth. And he replied, and we just confirmed in an email that he's going to be on in July. And I'm like, holy fuck. How is this happening? I am a firm believer that you should, in a polite way, in a non-pain-in-the-ass way, you can tag people and talk to them. There's been very little flack from my practice of doing that, but the people that have given it flack, I just see them as someone taking a shot at someone that's actually doing something. I don't think they're doing too much. And isn't that always the case? The one being creative usually gets attacked by someone that's like maybe not so happy with himself.
Or people are afraid to take a chance too, and they're afraid, and people can be savage too on social media, and people can
Oh
be
yeah.
so each other like, in terrifying ways. So in some ways, I think it makes us more. I am braver now than I have ever been because I'm older now too, and that so much doesn't bother me anymore. Or you see, not with more things don't matter as much, but the things that do matter a lot. But a lot of stuff just doesn't matter. It's like, what there was a great saying, and I have no idea where this proverb comes from, but it's the dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. Just move on. The hater's gonna hate. And yeah, when you're authentically reaching out to someone, and if they don't respond, then it's their loss. Or maybe they can't, or they're busy, or they have problems, or who knows what. But to be honestly invited to be part of something, why wouldn't you respond?
Yeah. No, you know what? One of my favorite authors is Clive Barker. That dude's not easy to get in touch with. I've gone nowhere. But I would kick myself in the ass if I said if I didn't do anything.
If you didn't try.
Never say never. You don't know.
That's true. I'm gonna keep trying. But I've been just so enthralled with what you're so fucking smart, Kathy.
I get extra points because it's late for me, man. I should be asleep by now. So I get so many extra points for being upright and awake at this time and coherent. So
I appreciate
all the points. Good work.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. Next episode is only in a few days. It'll be on Thursday with the folks that we have mentioned a few times, Liza Cantoral and Christoph Paul. When I first asked Liza how to, because I never pronounced her name out loud before, I was like, how do you pronounce it? Brennan, please tell, you are going to do a better job.
It's Lisa, and it's not that hard. And, you know, because you were on the phone with her the other night, that she would probably kick your ass by now for how many times you've gotten it wrong. She'd have no problem.
Wait, what have I been saying?
You've been saying Liza for the last
hour.
No,
this is what I did last
Liza
time.
Minnelli.
Oh my god, it's Lisa. Oh, she's gonna kill me.
So
Krista,
nice knowing you.
She could kill me, so whatever. Not the first lady that pissed off because I'm an idiot. Her husband Christoph is what I was leading at. Oh man, that's what I was gonna say. Brennan, can you please retell that very quick comment that he said, Christoph, when he was trying to tell me how to pronounce his wife's name?
I don't know which one you're going for.
He was doing the impersonation of Tommy, whatever his last name is, the actor with the room. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
All right, it doesn't fucking matter, dude. It's like, what's in there? So you can catch that episode next Thursday. Thank you for listening.
I want to make sure you had some editing to do.
I'm not going to edit that out. Look, dude, when people eventually meet me at a con, I'm not going to make myself sound smarter because they're going to be like, this guy's a fucking idiot in person. Kathe, you're amazing. We can't wait to talk to you again. Bye, Velocities. It's through Meerkat Press. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you for having me. This was so fun. I can't believe that we talked for this. It literally went by in a second. And so, thank you for having me. And yes, everyone should buy all the good books and read them. And they should read them out loud to each other, too. That was something I was going to talk about. We did, and we'll do it next time. About reading out loud. I will do my dramatic reading of Dr. Seuss for you.
Oh my God.
Love it.
Yes.
It's going to be sweet. It's going to be sweet.
I can't wait. Okay.
All right.
Until next time.
Guys.
Have a good one. And everyone, you have a lot of choices with podcasts. Thank you for picking us.